The term homesteading is one of those multifaceted things that often loans itself to interpretation based on what a person's particular bias is. You give an example between two YouTubers who were kind of duking it out like Crips versus Bloods in a way that just wasn't really appealing at all. One was being attacked, the other the attacker. The assumption that someone needs all of these glamorous bells and whistles that are essentially high-tech for the age, such as a dehydrator, a solar-powered generator, indoor plumbing, freezing, and electricity, kind of leaves a whole bunch of people out to pasture because they're completely forgetting the frontiersman lifestyle of off-grid living. It's not something a lot of people do because it requires a little bit more know-how and a little less reliance on technology to actually accomplish it. And on the situation I'm talking about, the people that are kind of butting heads are people that live frontiersmen in a shack out in the woods versus people that have all the bells and whistles. So let me educate a few people on this particular thing. One, you can completely live like these folks did or do without all the tech. In fact, it's desirable if what you're really preparing for is one day the entire economy melting down and all of us living as if it is a dystopian sort of reality. The other way is to hope that nothing goes down. Hope that your technology will always work, that nobody's going to come destroy your solar power generator or steal it. Because in a dystopian future, people are rioting and looting. Which brings me to my next point, which is you won't necessarily be showing off the results of your hard work. And the reason for this is because the less people know about what you're doing, as far as food supplies go and whatnot, the better. Why go and tell everybody what you're up to? Why not tell them how many rounds of ammunition and how many guns you own? It's a great way to get targeted by the ATF, which I gotta tell you, doesn't sound like a really bright idea to me. But the thing that stuck with me the most is the fact that this is a community that's made up of different facets of different people living different lifestyles using the blanket statement under off-grid. And they shouldn't be fighting. In fact, they should be communing. They should be bonding with each other. One willing to learn something they didn't know from the other, on both sides. If you look at my lifestyle, I live in a trailer. I do my cooking outdoors. I have a smoker, a gas grill, and an open fire pit. According to that video that I'm referencing, people can't live that way, which is completely false. I own 3 tents. I used to have 4, but one of them got destroyed in a rather bizarre gardening accident. I also own a myriad of different ways to cook, whether it's cast iron, a bullet smoker, or a variety of other things. And for those of you saying, well, without charcoal, how do you use the bullet smoker? Well, it turns out that you can make your own charcoal rather easily and much cheaper than buying some of the stuff that is horrendously overpriced. I mean, come on, Kingsford. $16 for a bag of your charcoal, and that's the large bag, I realize, but just no. Come on. Really? Growing is another area that came up, and this one really burned my bottom, as Monty Python would say, because not everybody has great soil for growing in. As it turns out, the spot of land I'm on is completely rich in clay. Great if you're firing pots, not so great if you need good drainage for growing things. So everything we grow is in a container. And just 3 minutes Googling container growing anything on YouTube, not the phrase anything, but any item you can think of, there will be a how-to video on how to do that. So the lack of huge garden that is cited in this video I'm speaking of is a complete misnomer and a non sequitur. You don't necessarily need a huge garden. With that today, I'm going to show you our garden and some of the ways that we're doing sporadic gardening around the property. We've planted a variety of things. Some of them may surprise you. I've been dirt farming since I was young. My dad always had a garden, and he always planted. We always planted direct to seed except for tomato plants, pepper plants, and a few others. But it can be done. You can actually sow seed direct to soil and get amazing tomato plants. I've done it. Doesn't necessarily need to be started indoors. In fact, it's probably less work if you just do it direct to soil. I mean, it works. Why argue with success? So you're going to probably have some feedback on some of these planters. You're going to say that's not big enough or that's the wrong type. Bear in mind, I've done this before and my results have been successful. So I don't really need the validation. I appreciate the input, but anything and everything I'm doing is because I've tested it, I've tried it, and it's worked. So let's get started. So I'm going to get comfortable because I got bad knees and a bad back. This right here are tomatoes. Now nothing's popped up yet because we literally just planted these about 4 days ago. We used a general potting soil. We're doing organic. There are no pesticides. Pesticides are not generally a good idea. There's so much conflicting evidence and science about the use of pesticides, particularly Roundup, that it's just not a wise idea to plant and then use these pesticides, which are used to shock wheat crops, by the way, to make grain harvestable sooner, which may actually be the reason that there is a rise in gluten sensitivity. It may in fact have nothing to do with gluten and everything to do with the insane amount of pesticides used to speed up growth. Google it. So I basically planted 3 plants. They are exactly 6 inches apart from each other. And I've done this before. I did it last year very successfully. You might say, well, what about staking the tomatoes? Well, the great thing about this tiny planter is that I've definitely used enough soil. Again, I've done this before. And because the planter is the way it is, you can stake right behind it into the ground and tie the tomato plants to the stake. If you have a bigger planter, like one of those large metal ones like Home Depot sells, you've got other options as well, where you can put the trestle, is that what they call it? I don't know, the big wiry thing, right into the planter. However, we have amassed dozens upon dozens of these plastic planters, and we've reused them over and over for 10 years, and they always do great work. We've grown hot peppers in them, sweet peppers in them, tomatoes in them, cherry tomatoes, you name it, we pretty much have grown it. It works great when you have crappy soil. Our soil is great if you want, like I said, to make clay pots, but unfortunately we don't have a furnace, which is a shame because we could probably go into business around here, along with the iron deposits that make the water bad. It's the one thing that I have that I'm not proud of is water service from a vendor, because the water, I mean, you boil it and you're just like, I'm not putting that in my mouth. That's crazy. So this is tomato plants. Like I said, 3 in here, and they will do great and they'll produce a lot of tomatoes. We actually have 2 or 3 of these, and they're going to prove to be great, because this year we're doing something that I've never done before except for tomato sauce, and that's canning. This little planter, which has a glass screen, is actually not a little planter. And inside it we have corn. And we're going to get more of these to put corn. Some might argue that there's not enough dirt. It has settled a little bit. But we're just going to wait to see if it pops up in the next week or so and see how it does. The future, we're probably going to get a slightly bigger tub and deeper dirt. But this is the first time I've attempted corn in a container. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I know I need a slightly larger container, and I know that you need to keep the corn close to each other so they can cross-pollinate. I'm not thrilled with the way this came out, especially with all of this. There's a ton of that, which I identified this morning what it is, and actually is a useful weed, believe it or not. But That is the corn. You might recognize this area behind me as being our outdoor kitchen with the cooking pit and so forth. In this area, we're going to plant pumpkins. Pumpkins make great ground cover, and in the hotter months of July and August, it actually protects the grass, and the grass slows down its growth a little bit. So it's a win-win. We grew pumpkins a few years ago. They were 25-pounders, and nobody wanted to pay what we wanted for them. We wanted 10 bucks for a 25-pound pumpkin. And the complaint we were getting was, well, Walmart has pumpkins for like 5 bucks. And I'm like, yeah, those are like 10-pound pumpkins. These are 25 pounds. Your toddler can sit on this pumpkin. What's the problem? It wasn't like we were charging per pound. It was $10, you know. Pay me for my work. Stop complaining. But that's what people do. They think that Walmart is the world, and they want that Walmart bargain. So we're going to plant a couple of pumpkin plants back here. We're going to create dirt piles and plant 3 seeds in each one, probably just 2 because they grow like crazy. And maybe 1 or 2 varieties of winter squash because I love table queen acorn squash. Oh, so good. So good. Anyway, that's the plan. The plants I didn't show you, hot peppers, beans, like pole beans. We got a lot of stuff. Let's just put it that way. And I made this video to point something out. We don't have the ability to plant directly in ground because of the enormous clay content of the soil. Plus, behind me, off in the distance, is a black walnut. So some plants just won't perform under a black walnut. Actually, they'll underperform. You won't get anything from them. We planted corn a few years ago. And if we were doing the Chinese corn, you know, the little tiny ears that they have, we'd have been set. Unfortunately, that's not what we were going for. Our corn this year is Golden Cross Bantam, but I'm trying to get my hands on some gentleman corn because that's got a unique taste. And if you mix them together and freeze them or you can them, they produce a medley of flavors that's really nice. Fresh vegetables, canned vegetables yourself, are going to be healthier coming and going. If you can freeze them, freeze them. Freeze your veg, man. Do it because you should do it while you can. But learn canning because canning is like, there are people, I mean, let me put it this way. So back in 2007, 2008, probably 2008, I just moved back from Florida and went over to my parents' house and we had spaghetti. Well, this was using a sauce that's canning date was 1996. That's how long that lasted. Over 10 years. And it still had way better flavor than anything the grocery store puts out. My parents are retired now, and they're a little slower these days. So they don't do the canning. They still do gardening. But canning is, when it comes to tomato sauce, it is an enormous project that you really have to dedicate a whole day to making tomato sauce. And that is just, I mean, I could do it. I might even do it. But here's the other thing to consider. Pressure cookers are not cheap, okay? The really good ones clock in at about $400. In reality, a halfway decent pressure cooker clocks in at $99. And these are the ones specifically designed for canning. You can't just go off willy-nilly and buy any pressure cooker on the landscape and hope that it does the trick, because it won't be big enough for your mason jars. But in this scenario, you want an actual canning pressure cooker, because that is going to be all you need. And can like a maniac, can like you think that the world is coming into an end tomorrow, and then you will never be in want. My second piece of advice when it comes to food: learn how to do dry storage as often as you can. It can be done with fish, it can be done with beef, it can be done with pork. It's all about drying, and you can literally smoke meat and brine it, even over a fire, by using a really, really odd setup. Maybe I'll link it to a video that shows you how to do that. And dry your meat and dry store it. I mean, you don't need a dehydrator, folks. I'm sorry. You just don't need a dehydrator. To come on a platform like YouTube and say, you need a dehydrator, just shows that what you're really about is glamsteading. Glamsteading is a term I use to come up with people that think they need all the bells and whistles in order to successfully homestead. And it's an absolute lie. You could plan like you're going to live in the woods like a wild man for the next decade, homestead off of the wild, and do perfectly fine. Probably won't be the warmest, probably aren't going to have the greatest conditions when it gets cold out, but you can do it. People did it for hundreds of years. People lived in caves, people lived in tents. It was just the way society was. So to come on here and say, you can't do it, nobody lives that way, nobody could live that way, is just realizing that your knowledge in history of the world is limited to what happened in the last 10 years. And if all you know is who had the top single in 2007, you should probably go do some research, look up frontiersmen, watch the Townsends, do all that stuff, because it's important that you understand that just because you don't have a large budget doesn't mean you can't do this. That's it for me. I'm Vince. Thanks for watching Dragonwick. We'll catch you on the flip side.